Today, Americans would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told there was an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all peoples of the world will plead with world leaders to deliver them from this evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by their world government. And that was said by Henry Kissinger back in 1992. Interesting the way things play out, isn't it, folks? You know, on the last report I gave you, I said they're going to use these protests and these riots and all of these racial protests against the people, and they were going to use these protests to say that we are now in danger of a second wave of coronavirus. And of course, we're seeing that come out now with the Australian government announcing that they believe that the Black Lives Matter protests could delay the easing of COVID-19 restrictions by more than a week and cost the Australian economy $1 billion. And that's not even to mention the second wave. But there's all sorts of talk about the possibility of a second wave as well. And on top of that, folks, what we see is, surprise, surprise, when I was talking about how they want to dismantle the police force and defund the police force, and how a lot of this activity has been portrayed in such a way so as to get the people to distrust the police force. Now, to really push the people and the police against each other. They want the people to hate the police. I said this a few reports ago. Well, now, surprise, surprise, we see George Floyd's family asking the United Nations to come in and disarm the US police. Now, I don't know whether this is true, but it's been put out by Breitbart, and I think I've seen it somewhere else as well. And that seems to be quite predictable, and one must think of Henry Kissinger's quote, how people would welcome the UN troops once things got destabilized enough for any sort of threat, real or promulgated. And this has been spurred on by Antifa, or Black Lives Matter. These groups in the United States that are fascist groups that claim to be anti-fascist groups. The first time I encountered this was in Germany, in I think it was 2015 or 2016. I was doing a talk in Germany, and I met these people, and they said, you have to watch out for some of the activists we have here. We have these groups that are anti-fascist fascists. And I couldn't really figure out what they would mean by that. How could any anti-fascist group be fascist, And then Antifa came on the scene, and Black Lives Matter comes on the scene, especially Antifa, which claims to be anti-fascist and is the most fascist and controlled group you've ever seen. And what it reminds you of is the Chinese Red Guard. When the Cultural Revolution took place in China, it was all about overthrowing the old ways and introducing the new ways. This was one of Mao's revolution, Mao Zedong. And it changed China for good, it changed it permanently. And the people did it, the young kids did it, they were coerced into doing it under the pretext of finding freedom for themselves and creating a better world, casting out all the old corruption and bringing in the new world they wanted. But all it did was give complete power to the state, absolute control to the state. And during the process, they destroyed all of the old knowledge, all of the old ways, all of the old monuments, all the stuff that we're seeing Antifa do now. The pulling down of monuments, the pulling down of statues and saying, well, these are statues that are, relating to this and relating to that. With Black Lives Matter, they're pulling down statues that are, might be statues from the era of Lincoln or whatever, saying, oh, these are the slave period, so we want to pull these down because this statue represents slavery. And really, it doesn't. It represents history. And what the people are doing is demolishing their history And that history which is erased will be replaced, it will be rewritten, and people will be given another history which will be as contrived as the first history. Because I don't believe any of the history they give us to be true anyway. But this is what is happening, folks. It's very much like what we saw in China during the Cultural Revolution, and the people are being hoodwinked into going along with it.
Mao had announced the beginning of his great proletarian cultural revolution, a call to hunt down and eliminate the bourgeoisie who had sneaked into the party, basically to purge the government of anyone who strayed from principles of Maoism. And it kicked into high gear after his historic swim, which prompted a craze for swimming in China, but more importantly, a craze for Mao, especially among the group that Mao wanted to influence the most, China's youth. Writer Lang Heng recalled that seeing Mao as human flesh and blood after the Yangtze swim resolved him to serve him with all his heart. Millions of Chinese youth organized into the fanatical Red Guards, a paramilitary force concentrated mostly in Chinese cities. And with Mao's blessing, they wreaked havoc in the name of cultural revolution. Their mission was to destroy the four olds.
Old culture, old ideology, old customs, old traditions, all of the olds must be destroyed.
The idea was basically to tear down the vestiges of imperial China and rewrite history centered around Mao Zedong, renaming buildings and streets, destroying cultural sites, and violently humiliating and often torturing and murdering anyone they accused of opposing Mao's ideas, which they plastered all over the cities and carried in their pockets in the form of Mao's Little Red Book, a collection of his sayings and principles. And although the violent Red Guards were basically dissolved by 1969, the Cultural Revolution is considered to have continued until Mao's death in 1976, ending a decade of destruction that had elevated the leader to godlike levels and resulted in over 1 million people dead.
Anytime, any place, punch a Nazi in the face. Anytime, any place, punch a Nazi in the face. Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
You know, this whole play isn't over yet. There's a lot more to it. I mean, we're making good headway, though. I mean, there's a good chance that they're not going to get away with it. I mean, we can see all the things they want to do. They want to bring in the UN. They want to replace the police. They want to bring in, you know, all of this new stuff they want to bring in. And they want to lock everybody into the system. And I have no doubt that they will attempt to present the concept of a second wave. But will they get away with it? That's the question. You know, a lot of people are waking up to it now, and there's a good chance that the wheels may just fall off the system before they get a chance to complete all of this. You know, and even the WHO, it's completely, it doesn't know what it's talking about. Here you've got a statement from the WHO saying the asymmetric spread of coronavirus is very rare. You can't get it just by touching things. And then the very next day they release a statement saying, well, actually, I didn't say what I just said, and that it was a misunderstanding saying that transmission is very rare. So, you know, they're pulling themselves left and right and back and forward, and they don't really know what they're doing, folks. So, you know, there's so many people waking up to it. A lot of people are questioning the lockdown. A lot of people have seen that it's completely ridiculous what they've done. There's a great comment that was sent to me by a friend, which I will read to you here, if I can find it. And what is said here, I mean, this response, just in the United States, the response to COVID-19 has added nearly $6 trillion to the US national debt. It's laid off or furloughed 50 million workers. It's placed 60 million people on food stamps, gone from 3.5% to 14.7% unemployment, has crippled the petroleum industry, ruined the tourism industry, bankrupted the service industry, caused an impending meat and protein crisis, threatened, fined and arrested church leaders, exacerbated mental health problems, shut down schools and colleges, given unbridled power to unelected officials, increased suicides higher than COVID-19 deaths, delayed surgeries and treatments for profound illnesses, infringed upon countless important civil liberties, placed 300 million Americans under house arrest, and these consequences are largely due to two things. First is the view of government as a god that can control providence and plagues. In our hubris, we increasingly view the government as a deity who can stop acts of nature. And the second is our snivelling 21st century commitment to safety. Our desire to be safe ruined our fiscal, physical, medical, food, energy, and national security. Unfortunately, there is no vaccine for cultural fragility. And that was written by someone called J.D. Hall. And I completely agree with that, folks. Yeah, that's what's going on, and it's a pretty drastic situation. But, you know, with all of this coming to light, there's a very good chance that they won't get away with a second wave. There's a very good chance they won't get away with increasing the lockdown. I think people have pretty much had enough. But the important thing is to see how people are being played with these riots and these race riots and all the stuff that's going on. And I don't even think it's as big as what people are saying. You know, they show us this stuff and they tell us that it's, you know, all of Minneapolis is, you know, in chaos. And it's probably only just a little pocket. You know, all of these places are probably just little pockets where this is happening, all based on this murder of George Floyd, if he even died, you know, and there's questions around that as well. But, you know, it doesn't matter at the moment. What matters is the result of, you know, what this has set into motion. You know, there's no point even arguing over the details of that at the moment, because it was staged for a reason, and that reason is unfolding now. It's important that we keep up with ahead of things, you know, and address what's unfolding before us. But like I said, this is a cultural revolution such as we saw in China, and it's the way they introduce massive totalitarianism, the way they move you into a fully communist system. You know, creating the welfare state that they've done through all this. And then if they do bring in the UN troops at the behest of the people, and the people actually request it, well, that would be the icing on the cake, wouldn't it? You know, and it's not going to happen everywhere. I mean, it's reasonably okay here in Australia. It's reasonably okay. I mean, they're open things just about up altogether, I think, in New Zealand. This will, of course, be pending the onset of the second wave, whether they do that or whether they're able to get away with it. And I think a lot of politicians as well consider the wheels are falling off, so they've got to try to manoeuvre themselves into some positions of safety as well and try to gain some bit of face. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. But, you know, the United States has always been the real prize in this. They want to bring down the United States, and this has pretty much done it in so many ways. There's still got a way to go yet. It's a way to bring it down completely. It's still a way to go to bring it down completely. But what they've done to the economy of the United States, it's going to be pretty horrendous. It's not going to recover from this. So, you know, unless there is some huge positive sort of awakening, unless there is some positive push towards, you know, something better than what you've got. I mean, you don't want the United Nations coming in. Sure, a system of, you know, voluntarism without government at all would be great. But that will take a generation or two to be able to get that in place. I mean, you need to re-educate people on what it means to be free. But through this, I mean, don't believe what the media is telling you, and don't believe that these riots and protests must bring the country down, because they don't have to. You know, you still don't have to do what you're told through all this, folks. You still can break the lockdown. You still can break all the social tracing and all the contact tracing and all the stuff they want to do. You still can refuse to comply, you know, and, you know, express a loss of confidence in your government if they're claiming you need to do this sort of stuff, in your particular state governments. Show them the figures. Show what they've actually done and just name it. I mean, you don't even have to show them, just name it. Don't roll over on command. Just say to them, look, for all of this, all the stuff that like I just read to you before that was said by J.D. Hall, I mean, all that stuff. For this, you're telling me we need this contact tracing. I think you are out of line. And I think we need to look at what you're doing and what your response to this has been and who stands to gain from all this, because this pandemic isn't anywhere near what you guys said it was going to be. And, what you're doing, well, it's come down to the wire. We didn't employ you for this. And what you're doing, you can't even pretend that it's been done for public safety anymore, because none of your response to this has brought about any safety to the public. It's been 10 times worse than this alleged virus. The response to the virus has always been worse than the virus, and that's what they're saying. But, I think it's really important for people to see, like I said, with these protests, have a look at the Cultural Revolution that happened in China. Have a look at what this Antifa movement is really doing. If you're out there and you're involved in these protests, think about what you're doing. Think about where you're being led. The enemy here isn't the older generation that let this happen, as you're claiming. There's been people that have been protesting since I was in high school doing exactly what you're doing now. And we didn't get anywhere because what you're doing is the wrong way to do it. That's why we became more like the intellectual activists that we've become. And you can sit there and say, oh, all you guys are, the truth community, you're just sitting there talking on YouTube, not actually doing anything. Well, we tried that. We tried that, what you were doing, and it led us into a police state, into further totalitarianism. And you're just putting the icing on the cake, because these revolutions, what you're doing now, these cultural revolutions don't work. It's all contrived, and this whole situation has been set up to run exactly the way it's running. And I've got, no problem with people who are speaking out against, racial violence. But really, it's the violence of the state against people. Race shouldn't even come into it. People of all nationalities, all colours, all creeds are all victims of state-sponsored violence. And that should be the issue. When you let race get into it, you lose the picture. It isn't about that. It's about the state and what the state wants to do. And all of these situations that are promoted this way, you can tell it's being done by the state. They want you to do what you're doing. I mean, Boris Johnson was saying people should go and protest for Black Lives Matter. On one hand, they're telling you shouldn't go outside, you shouldn't associate, you should be, maintain social distancing. On the other hand, they're telling you to go and protest because they want this. They want you all out there because there's so many ways they can play it. They can claim you brought about the second wave, or they can bring in this whole cultural revolution and move you into a communist state by having you go out and destroying infrastructure the way they want you to, and blaming your parents and blaming the old people. Blaming the old people, blaming the boomers for what happened, so we'll go out and smash up department stores and overturn cars and do all the stuff you're doing. It's ridiculous. Spray paint slogans all over things, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Destroy your history, destroy all your culture, homogenize the world, and move you more into dependence on the state. That's all Antifa and these other movements are doing. But anyway, folks, that's about all I've got to say to you today. I was going to bring you a walk and talk, but it's a horrible, miserable, rainy day, so I'm stuck inside. Thank you to all the people who send me so many kind emails. Thank you for the positive response I got for including that Bill Gates cartoon on the end. And thank you to the guy who did that cartoon, who sent it to me and asked me to share it. It's been really good to see. It seems to have gone pretty viral now, and it's a good one to share, folks. I'll put a link to it below again. You probably saw it on the last show that I did. It's a Bill Gates cartoon, goes for about 3 or 4 minutes, and it's an easy one to share with people, so I suggest you do that. And also put out a word to Saru G, the guy who sent me a few of the rap songs that I've used on a couple of previous broadcasts as well. He's a rapper from New Zealand. I'm not sure where he is at the moment, but I don't think he's in New Zealand. And yeah, good stuff. And if anybody else has any stuff they want to send along, be sure to send it, and I'll include it in the show. But thank you for joining me on the air today. Thank you to all the people who send me so many kind emails. Thank you to my Patreon supporters. Hopefully it'll be a good day and I'll be able to bring you another walk and talk tomorrow. But either way, I'll bring you another report soon. Please take very good care until then, folks, and stay well, stay safe, stay positive, and stay secure. And don't feel too negatively about what's happening, because there is a lot of good in what's happening with this as well. You know, the wheels may well fall off this whole system before too long, because they're going too hard, too fast, and it's causing way too many people to wake up to the fact that something is terribly wrong. So, yeah, all is certainly not lost. Do keep a positive, front on this. Do keep a positive stance on it, and no stake in the outcome anyway, folks. It's all about the game we're playing here. So, and I'll bring you a little bit more on that a little bit later. But anyway, folks, please take very good care until next time we speak to each other. In Lakesh.